The Colombian Geological Service reported that the seismic activity continues and increases at the volcano Nevado del Ruiz. Classified military documents detailing the U.S. and NATO plans on building up the armed forces of Ukraine before the planned counteroffensive at the front have leaked to Twitter and Telegram, prompting a Pentagon investigation. And China reported the imposition of sanctions on Taiwan's representatives to the United States, Xiao Kim, for asking for support from the Biden administration to push the island's independence agenda. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. And now we begin with the news. On Friday, the Colombian Geological Service reported that seismic activity continues and increases in the volcano Nevado del Ruiz. According to the most recent report of the institution, the increase in the seismic activity is associated with fracturing of the rock inside the volcanic edifice. On Thursday, 3,100 minor quakes and a stronger quake were recorded in the afternoon, all in the southwestern sector of the volcano at depths between 2 and 4 kilometers closer to the crater. On Friday, about 1,500 earthquakes have been registered related to the movement of fluids inside the volcanic conduits. So far, the authorities have evacuated the communities located nearby the volcano. The Nevado del Ruiz last erupted on November 13, 1985, killing 23,000 people and prompting a major natural disaster. In Canada on Wednesday night, an ice storm battered the eastern provinces of Quebec and Ontario, killing 2 and leaving close to 1 million people without electricity. An Ontario resident was killed by a falling tree, while a man in his 60s died crushed by a branch he was trying to cut in his yard. Quebec Economy and Energy Minister Pierre Fitzgibbon said at a media briefing that Montreal was devastated, but that the situation was under control. Some people said it is the worst storm they have seen in over 20 years. Emergency centers have taken in residents without power while temperatures hovered near freezing. Authorities have urged caution, advising people to stay away from downed power lines and avoid walking in wooded areas where trees laden with ice might topple. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was in Montreal assessing the damage on the ground alongside Montreal's Mayor Valérie Plante. In the U.S., a teenager from Colorado Springs was charged on 5 counts, including attempted murder, after she was arrested following the discovery of a manifesto and plans to perpetrate a shooting at a local high school. According to the district attorney's office, William Whitworth, 19, was arrested at her home in late March after, in a violent episode, she attempted to assault her sister and threatened to shoot up at a school. After being investigated for threatening different Colorado Springs schools she attended to between 2014 and 2016 and plotting a plan to carry out a shooting at one of them, the former student, who identifies herself as Lily, was charged with 2 counts on attempted first-degree murder, criminal disturbance, menacing, and interfering with staff, faculty, or students for educational institutions. The judge in charge of the case set a $75,000 bond for the teenager and summoned her to appear at a preliminary hearing on May the 5th. On Thursday night, a fire broke out at a main food marketplace in the Mexico's capital. The market, called Central de Abastos de Iztapalapa, a supply center, is located in the control colony east of Mexico City. Firefighters and other authorities at the site reported a smoke column over 50 meters high. The fire affected 5,640 square meters of the market's empty packaging sector, where cardboard, wood, plastic boxes, pallets, reed baskets, and raffia sacks were stored. The marketplace occupies an area of 327 hectares and gets thousands of visitors every day. Mexico City Civil Protection Secretary Miriam Ursúa told reporters that so far there are no people reported dead nor injured, as the marketplace was already closed at the time of the fire. In Guatemala, on Thursday, the People's Liberation Movement filed an injunction before the Supreme Court of Justice as they condemned their representatives are being deprived of the right of registering for the upcoming presidential elections. According to local media, their request has been delayed for months by bureaucracy, which they claim translates into loss of democracy and the violation of the constitutional right to elect and be elected. Movement lawyer Gustavo Maldonado said the party has faced many obstacles since its registration, especially from the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, which in unison with the banks prevented them from opening a bank account. Analyst and San Carlos University professor Adrián Zapata said that the Supreme Court of Judges have a mixture of horror and contempt facing the possibility of indigenous people acquiring political power, for they fear the latest trend in Latin America of leftist political movements gaining strength. The Attorney General's Office of the Plurinational State of Bolivia filed on Thursday a criminal accusation against the former governor of Santa Cruz, Luis Fernando Camacho, for his involvement in the so-called Carro Bombero case. Camacho was charged with the crimes of breach of duties, embezzlement, traffic of influence, anti-economic conduct, and contracts harmful to the state around the fraudulent purchase of a fire truck that was never delivered. The Public Prosecutor's Office made a formal request for preventive imprisonment for 180 days in the Chonchocoro prison, where the former governor of Santa Cruz is currently being held for the coup d'etat case that in 2019 led to a breakdown of the democratic institutionality of the Indian country. According to Congressperson Rolando Cuellar, the delivery of the fire truck was not made on the agreed date, suggesting the existence of an irregular contracting around the purchase that was not made through a public bidding process. In Haiti, United Nations has condemned the kidnappings of Dr. Jacques Nonzi, Director General of the National Laboratory. UN Humanitarian Coordinator for Haiti, Ulrika Richardson, said the kidnapping, which occurred on the night of April the 5th, is the latest in a string of attacks involving healthcare facilities, schools, and churches. The UN is calling on the authorities to provide greater protection for health and education workers. The General Director of Haiti's National Laboratory was attacked with firearms, kidnapped, and later released. According to the UN figures, in 2022 alone, over 20 doctors were kidnapped in Haiti. Let's take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Classified military documents detailing U.S. and NATO plans on building up the armed forces of Ukraine before the planned counteroffensive at the front have leaked to Twitter and Telegram, prompting a Pentagon investigation. The documents, marked top secret and dated March the 1st, 2023, includes information on schedule for arms supplies, troop numbers, and ammunition costs. However, they did not provide details on how, when, and where Ukraine intends to launch its counteroffensive. According to the U.S. media, especially the New York Times, the classified documents contain data on 12 combat brigades created by the armed forces of Ukraine, of which 9 are being prepared and supplied by the United States and NATO with more than 250 tanks and 350 mechanized vehicles. U.S. administration officials are said to be working on deleting the files that appeared on social networks earlier in the week, but they were still posted on the evening on April the 6th. And for the first time since the beginning of the conflict in Ukraine, the United Kingdom Defense Ministry recognized that Russian troops are advancing on their objectives. In its daily intelligence update, the British Defense Ministry said Moscow has recently regained momentum in the battle for Bakhmut after seizing the west bank of the Bakhmut River. The update also reported that Wagner forces and Russian Defense Ministry commanders have improved cooperation. In this sense, the London report claimed that the Russian deployment on the ground would impact a major supply route for Ukraine, and they will be using increasingly effective artillery in their future operations in Kyiv. The foreign ministers of Russia and Turkey, Sergei Lavrov and Mevlut Cavusoglu, respectively, held a meeting in Turkey on Friday, after or where they discussed issues related to peace in Ukraine and the grain distribution agreement. The head of the Russian diplomacy has declared that peace talks in Ukraine will be possible only under a new world order and a new approach, without disregarding the alternatives for the continuation of the grain agreement and all the efforts that the peace requires. The head of Russian diplomacy reiterated that peace talks can only take place if Russian interests are taken into account. Minister Lavrov insisted that this will be the principles on which a new world order will be founded. On Friday, China reported the imposition of sanctions on Taiwan's representative to the United States, Xiao Bi-Kim, for asking for support for the Biden administration to push the island's independence agenda. In this regard, a spokesperson for the Taiwan office of the Communist Party of China's Central Committee stated that no person or force should underestimate the determination and ability to defend China's sovereignty and the territorial integrity. The restrictive measures, which also extend to his Xiao's family, banned their entry to mainland China, Hong Kong and Macau, as well as prohibiting his funding sources or related companies from cooperating with Chinese individuals or organizations. In addition, the Taiwan Affairs Office of the State Council on Friday announced sanctions against the Prospect Foundation and the Council of Asian Liberals and Democrats. The heads of these sanctioned organizations will also be denied access to mainland China, Hong Kong and Macau. On Friday, Chinese President Xi Jinping held an informal meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron in Zhongjuan, Guangzhou. Xi Jinping received Macron at the lakeside promenade, and the two heads of state had a cordial exchange. Xi and Macron strolled around the garden and talked while surrounded by the unique scenery of the gardens of Guangdong governor's residence in Guangzhou. Macron arrived on Wednesday in Beijing as part of a state visit to meet with his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping, and address various political issues, including the conflict in Ukraine. For his part, Xi has shown no change in his country's stance on the tensions between Moscow and Kyiv, despite Macron's intense attempts. And the French Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne on Friday stated the nation needs to give people a rest after weeks of fierce clashes over President Emmanuel Macron's pension reform. After a meeting with unions representatives broke out without any progress on Wednesday, the French Premier said that the workers must not emerge humiliated from the pension battle. In this sense, Laurent Berger, head of the French Democratic Confederation of Labour, said it was better to have calming words rather than stigmatizing ones, and that for things to calm down, the reform must be set aside. Protests over the pension reform took a turning point last month when the government used a constitutional provision to ram their changes of passing said reform through the parliament without a vote. The pensions reform is currently being examined by the Constitutional Council, which will rule on whether the law is permissible on April 14th. The Director General of the World Health Organization, WHO, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, warned at the 5th Global Forum on Human Resources for Health that by 2030 there will be an estimated global shortage of some 10 million medical specialists, mainly in poor countries. Ghebreyesus stressed that the high-income nations are not exempt from this situation, as a report last year noted that in Switzerland a potential shortfall of 45,000 health workers is expected in the coming years. years. He also said that the shortage of doctors results in additional pressure in existing workers, creating stress in the job. Furthermore, Ghebreyesus stated that medical personnel in 160 countries are showing dissatisfaction with working conditions in their workplaces. In this way, the official urged governments around the world to protect and invest in health workers through decent working conditions, fair wages, training, and leadership. TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries using StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy a Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Politicians, lawmakers, and leaders in the Middle East and around the world hold the right-wing Israeli government as responsible for the latest violence escalation against the Palestinian people and Lebanon. The violence exercised by the occupier against Palestinian population, which this Thursday crossed a new limit with a second consecutive attack on the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of the holiest places for Muslims, was spread to other territories in Palestine and Lebanon. A heavy exchange of rockets, as well as new assaults on the mosque and raids on the settlements, in addition to the shelling of southern Lebanon, are seen as the result of the policies of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who many believe has tried to cover up the political and institutional crisis in his country by attacking the Palestinian people. The Lebanese government confirmed it intends to file an official complaint before the United Nations Security Council over the deliberate Israeli aggression that took place on Friday. The country's foreign ministry issued a statement right after the Israeli forces launched an airstrike near the Palestinian refugee camp Rashidia. The ministry reaffirmed Israel has violated Lebanon's sovereignty by bombing areas in the south of the nation. In this sense, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates Abdullah Abu Habib instructed the permanent mission of Lebanon to the United Nations in New York to submit an official complaint to the UN Security Council regarding the impact of the Israeli bombing and the deliberate aggressions. And the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas condemned the Israel Defense Forces airstrikes on Lebanon on Friday and accused Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government of violating the sovereignty of brotherly Arab countries. In a statement issued after the most recent attacks, the movement expressed solidarity with the Lebanese people and condemned the blatant Zionist aggression against its people. Hamas also warned the Israeli occupation that they should expect a swift and proper Islamic response from the resistance with heavy artillery, which they confirmed have not been used so far. The latest statements came after Israel's premier assured that his nation will strike back against his enemies. Meanwhile, Lebanese authorities confirmed the latest attack hit clearance near the Palestinian refugee camp Rashidia, with no damage reported at the moment. The government of Yemen and the Houthi rebels are making final arrangements for a truce that experts said could be the prelude to a comprehensive peace agreement. Spokespersons for the parties involved in the conflict indicated that the first stage of the process will begin with a declaration of a new truce that will last until the end of 2023. This initial step will be accompanied by a easing of restrictions on flights to the capital under the control of insurgent forces. It also includes the resumption of crude oil exports and the full reopening of roads throughout the country. The process will be carried out in 3 phases and will involve Saudi Arabia and Iran. Yemen's civil war began in 2014 when Houthi insurgents took control of the capital Sana'a, demanding lower fuel prices and a new government. The peace proposal from Mali's military junta is not progressing, far from it. The country once again experienced another terrorist attack that left at least 5 people dead. The attack occurred at the police station in Zambougu in the town of Koulikoro, not far from the country's capital. The victims, 2 gendarmes, an officer and 2 civilians, were in the police station when the armed attack took place. Those responsible have not yet been identified, and no group has claimed responsibility for the aggression. A week ago, most of the armed groups rejected the peace agreement proposed by the military junta after declining to accept the draft of the constitution. Mali is in the throes of an 11-year-old security crisis, and since August 2020, the Sahel country has been ruled by the military. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.